Ooh, music came in a little loud. Let's bring it back down. Get this party started. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky, and welcome to my studio. Today we're going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists of all time. Today we're going to be looking at the art of J.E.H. MacDonald. And MacDonald was one of the founding members of Canada's famous Group of Seven. And the Group of Seven is the most important art group and art movement in Canadian history. A group that was comprised entirely of landscape painters who did do a little bit of other things, but primarily landscapes at the turn of the, well, around 1920 to 1930 or so 100 years ago. And this is by far not the most famous J.E.H. MacDonald painting that exists, but I love this painting. And I also thought it was a little bit different than some things we've done before. I love the shadows in the foreground from these clouds that are really thick, opaque. So I just thought it would be something kind of fun and a little bit different while we explore the work of this great, great artist. So let's look at the plan for today's episode. We're going to get the image onto the canvas. Then we're going to stain it with a little bit of color. Then we'll talk about MacDonald's biography. I don't think we'll do an underpainting. We'll go right into the background. And I've got to be completely done by 7 and 3 hours from now. So we will be doing our side-by-side comparison in 2.5 hours or so. Of course, if you're watching this long after it's recorded, you're welcome just to jump right to the end and see how it turned out. And if you want to continue, jump right back to here. Welcome! Oh, you liked how it turned out. Great, nice to see you again. So, since you loved it so much, why don't you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, let your friends know about the channel, take a photograph of the artwork you create, upload it to our Facebook group, which I'll show you in just a second. And if you want to support the channel with a small donation, go right ahead. Hey, it's Christmas time. It'd be great to have your support going into the new year, so consider doing that. There's various different ways you can contact me. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's get this image onto the canvas. Now, I've created a template, an outline, which you can download for free on the Dropbox. There's a link to the Dropbox in the description below. Here's the Facebook group, and here's the Here's the Dropbox folder that you can click the link in the description to find this. You'll see that there's our intro episodes at the top, and then our most basic introductory paintings, of which what I would consider today to be a relatively straightforward painting. And I'm going to try to approach it in the most simple way possible, so even a beginner can do it. And then you'll see down here all these ones that got numbers. These are a little bit more complex, but still doable, I think, for a beginner, certainly for an intermediate painter. And of course, you can follow along in real time and paint with me. So, if you click that Dropbox link, you're going to see the original painting, and then 2 versions of the outline. One's a JPEG, one's a PDF, and eventually, again, there'll be the little cheat sheet with some instructions, which you can also follow as well. So, let's get... Oh, I don't have... That's interesting. Let's do that again. Okay, so here's my outline. Oh, here's next week's episode of Mary Cassatt. Then Walter Solomon's Jesus, a very famous painting. And then we have A.J. Casson's painting here will bring us close to New Year. So, gives you an idea of what's coming down the pipeline in the next few days. Anyway, I've downloaded and printed on my inkjet printer here at home the outline, and then I'm going to put it onto this canvas board, right? So I bought these canvas boards. This one, this might be the first time I've used this brand, so I can't remember So we'll see if how it holds up, and if I like it, I'll let you know, and I'll recommend it. But I've also, after I buy these, I open them up, and they basically look exactly like they do on camera, and then I put an extra coat of white gesso, acrylic gesso over it, let it dry, and then I sand it. So it's just a little bit smoother than it is when you buy them brand new. So let's put this on here. And let's see if we can get that relatively straight. I'm looking for my horizon line. You know, that would drive me nuts if a painting was like that. So looks good. Sometimes you use a ruler to make that measurement, but I think we'll be fine just like that. Okay, next step here is I'm going to use carbon transfer paper. You could buy this stuff from most, you know, well, I get these from like a local Dollar and More store down the street from our house. You could certainly get them from any art supply store, and there is also a link to buy them off of Amazon if you want as well. The one off Amazon, you get like 80 of them for $12 or some crazy deal, and you will have those until the day you die, because unless you're making dozens of paintings a day, you will never use them all. Because I will use this same sheet over and over and over again. I think you can get about 10 paintings out of one piece of carbon paper or graphite paper. So I'm just going to quickly do these outlines. I'm not going to do all of the lines and the clouds and the branches on this tree. I just need enough so that as I'm painting it, I have some kind of like signposts, some areas that are very clear to me where I am in the painting. And all these are just shadows. I should also, it's a good idea just to make sure that those lines are in fact going onto the canvas. Make sure that's in the clouds. Looks good. Okay, so I'll peel that off and I'll keep this handy to refer to. And then clean up as we go. Aman says, it's so frozen here, I miss spring. Whereabouts are you right now, Aman? Where it's that cold. It is cold here in Vancouver, Canada. But there's obviously some places in Canada that are much colder than Vancouver. So where are you where it's so cold? And Lolly's there, still working on the Santa painting. Well, you've got how many sleeps until Santa's actually there? What, 20 more sleeps? Or less? Gosh, time is flying. Okay, we've got our image onto the canvas. Let's move on to the next step here. So now what we want to do is we want to put some color on here. What the Italians called the Imprimatura, right? It's literally the first paint. The first layer of paint where and I like to think of this process as a way of just obliterating the white canvas, the scary white canvas. And I like to put a very specific color on here that is very specific to me. I've never seen anybody do this, but it's something that's grown out of our episodes. And if you've been following for a long time, you know the whole story. But whew. Okay. So what I've just done is I squeezed out some warm yellow onto this palette. This very specific yellow is by this brand, Amsterdam, and I'm just use this Azo Yellow Deep. And you can see I've called it a warm color as opposed to a cool yellow. Right, here's my cool yellow. And you'll notice I'm going to use 2 reds and 2 blues as well, and a white. And that's all we need to mix billions of colors. If you're watching for the first time, go watch one of the first episodes in the playlist for the Master Study series, and you'll see me explain this whole thing. But anyway, if you don't have Amsterdam paint and you want to use a different brand, let's go through some of the other ones here. There's Golden. This is a much more expensive, higher quality grade of paint, but I think most of you would not notice the difference at all. Liquitex, this is their student grade. They also have a professional grade as well. Winsor and Newton. Artist Loft from Michael's Art Supply chain. Buzz, Peebo, Holbein, Daler-Rowney, Fevicryl, Nova Color, Chroma Color, but not Museum Color. Because they put a little bit of white in that paint, and it makes, I don't know why they do it. I think it's just like, filler to make the color look brighter temporarily while it's on the shelf. But as for painting, at least the way that I paint, I think it's useless. So don't buy this. Buy one of the other ones I suggested. And if you're using a paint that's not listed here either, please let me know so that I can add it to the list of paints that we're using. I'm just going to put this paint out on my palette right now while I got these tubes in front of me. And anybody else fighting colds today? Or I took our daughter to the walk-in clinic today because she is not feeling good. Was feeling better and then feeling worse and feeling better all week long. So finally it's like, let's go get the expert opinion on this. And of course, expert opinion is just lots of naps and Tylenol. But I guess that's a good thing to find out. Could be worse, right? Okay, let's move that out of the way. Let's put a little bit of water in here. That's a little more than, just a little bit more than I need. Okay. Give it a good stir. Oh, there's Stacy says hello, and Aman says, I'm in Egypt, so far away from Canada, but it's so cold here. Wow, that's awesome. I love, what time is it in Egypt right now? My goodness, it's got to be like 4 in the morning or something. So, we'll put this all over here. I think this painting especially is going to benefit from this color, even though I guarantee you MacDonald never used this kind of approach. He would have put it in Imprimatura down, but I think it would have been much more of a brown or reddish, kind of rusty red color, earthy red tone. As we'll talk about here shortly, he was the oldest, most experienced member of the group of 7. For a while, he was their boss, well, the boss of many of them, when they worked at a graphic design firm. So he was, in many ways, the most experienced, most knowledgeable, most educated of all of these fellows. And was sort of seen by many of them as the mentor to them. Okay. Let's just clean up as we go. Okay, so it's 2:17 in the morning in Egypt. Not too bad. It's always colder, especially, in a climate like Egypt at night. Or so I've heard. I've never been to Egypt. The closest I've been to Egypt is Morocco, which I know is, about as far away from Egypt as, it's North Africa, but, they're not side by side or anything, but close enough, right? Okay. So, I think we're ready to move on. So, let's talk a little bit about who J.E.H. MacDonald was, what J.E.H. stands for, and learn a little bit about why I've chosen to paint today, this artist today, why I think he's such a great artist. So, let's go to the Wikipedia page. There's Pascaline says hi, and Kathy's there as well. So J.E.H. MacDonald, James Edward Hervey MacDonald, born in 1873 and dies in 1932 at the relatively young age of 59. For an artist, often a lot of artists aren't really getting started until their 50s, and that's kind of the case with MacDonald as well, because he was a family man, raising children, working as a graphic designer for most of his life until towards the end when he was able to kind of step back a little bit. But unfortunately didn't live too much longer after that. So MacDonald, like a few of the other members of the group of 7, is originally from England. He was born in Durham, England. I didn't know where Durham was. Durham is almost right here at this, at the very northern part of England, right near Scotland. Even further north than Liverpool, Manchester. That's as far north that I've ever been in the UK. I've never been to Ireland or Scotland or Wales, but yeah, Liverpool's that's as far north as I've gone. Anyway, you don't care where I've been. You're totally irrelevant. So he's born to, his mother was English, his father happened to be Canadian, was like a carpenter, woodworker, cabinet maker, and so they lived in England, in Durham, for the first 14 years of MacDonald's life, until at age 14 they moved to Hamilton, Ontario. And during this entire time, he's been making art, painting and drawing, likely probably visiting his father. His father probably brought wood home that he painted on. And so by the time they moved to Canada, he's already kind of going in a direction. And it's no surprise that he immediately starts taking classes at the Hamilton Art School. And one of his teachers is Arthur Hemming. Arthur Hemming is an artist that he's one of my favorite Canadian artists. I've been looking at him a lot recently because I'm drawing a graphic novel. And Hemming, what would you say? He's sort of like he's a very famous painter, but really more, I would think almost like bridging that gap between illustration and painting. He did a lot of book covers, like for like young adult fiction, kind of like not the Hardy Boys, but that type of book of early Canadian American history, and just really beautiful adventure kind of paintings. Anyway, I think it's amazing that Arthur Hemming was J.E.H. MacDonald's teacher at that really young age, that would have, I'm sure, made a huge impression on MacDonald. To have had an artist like that teaching him when he's like a preteen, that would have been really cool to have had a teacher like that. Later on in when well, we'll get to it, but they come, it kind of goes full circle where they share studios in the same building for a brief time, which I think must have been, again, another very satisfying thing for an artist like MacDonald, to not only stay in contact with his teacher and mentor, but to later on be sort of seen as his equal. I don't know if Hemming was, I think, was a little bit of a grumpy guy. I don't know how if they got along very well, but I just think that's super fascinating. So another thing, after a couple of years living in Hamilton, they moved to Toronto. And when he's in Toronto, he studies commercial art. He starts kind of spending a lot of time at the Toronto Art Students League, which was very similar to the one they had in New York, and which we just talked about the other day when we were talking about Norman Rockwell. Often you had these art students leagues where they're kind of like clubs that would also offer studio space and lessons. There'd be lectures, but it's not really necessarily a formal school. I don't really know. Those things don't really exist anymore. There's a few places in Europe that do it. They're kind of like, almost like the Banff Centre in Canada might be the closest example to what the Toronto Art Students League and the Art Students League in New York were. Anyway, so after that he continues studying at the Central Ontario School of Art and Design, where one of his teachers, we have George Agnew Reid, but William Cruikshank. And I haven't looked at it, but I would say that Cruikshank must have taught almost every single one of the group of 7 artists, except A.Y. Jackson. But almost all, including Tom Thompson, who was not a member of the group of 7, but took at least evening classes with Cruikshank. So that merits an episode in and of itself, because this guy is kind of a mentor to all of them, whether they were following his teachings or rebelling against him, which is often the case for artists. It's worthy of sort of a deeper investigation on my part, anyway. So another thing that happens very soon after finishing school is MacDonald starts working at the commercial design firm known as Grip Limited. Grip Limited was really, well, I don't think when he first joined it, but after he worked there for about 20 years, and towards the end, while he was working there, they really became the most important graphic commercial design firm in Canada, or at least in English Canada. There was probably a few bigger ones in Montreal, which was the bigger city back in the day. But it's while he's working at Grip Limited that he sort of keeps moving up the ranks, and by the 1910, you have a whole bunch of artists who start working there, including Tom Thompson, Arthur Lismer, I think A.J. Casson starts working there. I know I'm missing a few other ones. Who else was working there? Anyway, you have all these artists who, many of them have formal training, have gone to Europe to study, including MacDonald for a brief period of time. And so they're all knowledgeable artists who have a fine art background, as well as a commercial art experience, working shoulder to shoulder next to one another all week long. And that must have been just a fascinating, I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that room to see how all of those artists were collaborating, working together, sharing knowledge of new artists and techniques, etc. And MacDonald becomes the the studio manager. So he's kind of in charge of all of these younger artists. So he's born, as we said, in 1873. Most, if not all, of the other members of the Group of Seven are born in the 1880s and beyond. Lismer, like we just looked at last week, I think was born in 1890 or late 1880s. So he's at least a decade older than most of the other artists who later formed the Group of Seven. So he's sort of their mentor, like father figure for all of this kind of group of, I was going to say misfit guys, but they're all kind of middle class, upper middle class in the case of Lauren Harris, as we'll talk about here briefly. But MacDonald, even actually for a brief time, before all those guys join the firm, he goes back to England and he works at another design firm for, I think, 4 years, comes back to Canada and picks up where he left off. I should also say probably another big thing about some of these groups, like the Art Students League that he was a part of. A big part of that group would be to kind of go on these like social adventures. So not just like a pub crawl, which I'm sure they did do, but also to go on these little expeditions, go sketching and drawing in parks, museums, as well as a little bit further afield, like Algoma, and ultimately to the newly formed provincial park of Algonquin. Algonquin Provincial Park had just recently been founded at the turn of the century, or maybe it was shortly before. I thought it was, I could be like 1895 or 1902. Algonquin Park is founded, and it's also just worth knowing that Algonquin Park was basically completely clear-cut and logged. And really, once all the logging was sort of winding down, they're like, well, might as well turn this place into a park. And so when people see Algonquin Park today as this like pristine wilderness space, if you look at early photographs, you see the whole thing is just like the moon. And there's not a tree left on there. Anyway, another big event happens where in 1913, one of his best buds, Lauren Harris, who did not work at Grip Limited, because Lauren Harris, as we did a whole episode on him a few weeks ago, Lauren Harris, who was from a very wealthy family and was sort of, self-supporting, the two of them go down to Buffalo. They take the train down to Buffalo, New York, and they go see an exhibition at the Albright Knox Gallery, or it was at the time the Albright Art Gallery, of art from Scandinavia, from Norway, Finland, Sweden, etc. And all those artists happen to be, from a country whose climate is not too dissimilar from Canada. Lots of snow, lots of big open spaces, even similar types of trees. And so they see these paintings and they connect with the artists in a very deep way, especially the way that they're painted. They're sort of taking some of the approach of the Impressionist painters, but it's through the lens of a landscape that is much more desolate, much colder, lots more snow, and it just blows their mind because, again, they're more used to seeing art, if they've gone down to Buffalo in the past, by American artists, which at this time anyway is much more like the Ashcan School of Art, which is sort of the big movement in the United States at the time, is really focusing on these urban cityscapes, like lots of browns and grays of, big buildings in New York and Philadelphia, Chicago, and kids playing in the street around the fire hydrants, which are spraying water in the summer. And so that's the kind of big style that's taking over the United States at the time. Never mind what's going on in Europe with, now these avant-garde art movements like Fauvism, Futurism, then Cubism, and so on and so forth. So there's all this stuff going on. When they see what the artists in Scandinavia are doing, it's like lightning bolts go off. Like, whoa, this is much closer to what our environment is like. Let's do something like that. They come rushing back to Toronto. They're showing their sketches to their friends, at most of them at Grip Limited. Everyone gets super excited. They're super inspired. And that's sort of the beginning of their interest in forming a uniquely Canadian art movement. Of course, very soon after, they see an artwork by another artist from Montreal, A.Y. Jackson, who's sort of doing his own thing that is not too dissimilar from what they saw from these Scandinavian artists in Buffalo. And they encourage him to move from Montreal to Toronto, because Jackson was strongly considering moving to New York or even Europe instead, because he's really struggling to make it work in Montreal. And if you can't make it as an artist in Montreal, then Toronto is certainly not the place you would go, because Toronto is a much smaller, less business, less money, and what people are collecting in Toronto and Montreal is not really Canadian artists. They're mostly collecting famous European artists, because they don't want to look like if they've got someone from Toronto or New York visiting, they don't want to show them Canadian artists. They're going to look like they're they're a tiny backwater town. They want to look like, hey, I've got this Rembrandt here, and look at this, I got a Robert Henry painting. And so that was super frustrating. A.Y. Jackson writes a lot about that in his autobiography, about how frustrating it was trying to get collectors in Canada to pay attention to Canadian art. But one of the things that Lauren Harris does, because he comes from this wealthy family, is he builds this big studio, which still exists, which he very cleverly called the Studio Building in Toronto, and encouraged the great Canadian artists of the time to move in there. And of course, he included himself and his friends. But other artists that eventually moved into that building when it first opened were Arthur Fleming, the artist who, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, had been really the first major art teacher of J.E.H. MacDonald. So again, I just think that must have been just wild for MacDonald to be just down the hall from the guy who taught him everything he knew, or at least got him started and really fostered his interest in art. What else do I want to say? World War I erupts in 1914, and a number of these guys in this yet-to-be-formed group voluntarily enlist in the Canadian Army and go abroad, including A.Y. Jackson. Lismer, did he go over? Varley did, for sure. And Harris did, but since Harris is well connected, he got a cushy position out there. MacDonald, however, was too old at this point to go to war, so he stayed behind, as well as Tom Thompson. Tom Thompson, of course, was much younger. And we've talked about why he didn't go to war along with his friends, and there's lots of different opinions about that. No one knows for sure, of course, so it's all just conjecture. But Tom Thompson goes up to Algonquin Park and spends the next 3 years mostly in Algonquin Park, coming back to Vancouver, during the winters, and staying in the shack next to the studio building, literally outside the window of J.E.H. MacDonald's studio. Unfortunately, Tom Thompson dies in 1917 under mysterious circumstances, which is part of what my book is all about. But that was very traumatic for all of the artists involved, or the friends of Thompson, as well as anybody else who was working at Grip Limited. Tom Thompson was, I think, a pretty charismatic, adventuresome fellow, like grew up on a farm not too far away from Algonquin Park. And all of these guys were much more like city folk, had looked to Tom as kind of the symbol of what a Canadian artist and a Canadian in general was. And I'm sure, having grown up in England, MacDonald's, even though he was older than Tom, probably saw Tom as sort of representing all of these images of what a life as a young boy in Canada would have been like. So let's... After all those guys come back from World War I, they form the Group of Seven. I've talked about this many, many times, but what else do I want to talk about? I guess I should say that, MacDonald starts kind of at that time where right before World War I breaks out. MacDonald starts taking time off from his work. He moves with his wife out of town so that he can really try to focus as much as possible on landscape painting, but he finds it kind of tricky. He's still doing these kind of commissions on the side, and sometimes doing a lot more of them than he would have liked to have done. His son, Thoreau MacDonald, becomes his sort of right-hand man for a period of time, and becomes a noted illustrator and author himself. He writes, I think he writes his father's biography, and from there, MacDonald often starts going out west to the Rocky Mountains, along with Lauren Harris. They're painting these gigantic mountains, the Northern Lights, and but it's, in what's the date he actually dies? So he suffers a stroke in 1931, and he spends really the next couple of years in Barbados recovering, or attempting to recover. Obviously that it doesn't work because he dies in 1932, but I wonder if we have some of the images in here that he did in Barbados of like palm trees, because that is kind of, I don't see them here. Let me see, are there any at the end? I think it's worth a quick Google here. Oops. Because I think there's something to me that's kind of funny about a group of 7 artists who goes down to this very tropical climate and makes paintings down there, because we tend to identify the group of 7 purely with the Canadian landscape, and more often than not, these more snowy landscapes. So I just think, looking at some of these, I think it's quite wild to see how he took everything he learned from painting the Canadian landscape, and often painting the clouds primarily, like we'll see in today's painting, and just using that to paint a completely different space. And these are gorgeous. Like that is great. That would make a beautiful painting if someone wanted to make that. And again, these are paintings he made just before he died. So, this poor guy's got a stroke. He's trying to recover in Barbados, and just painting away like time is running out, and he comes back to Canada and dies. So what a huge loss, because he's really, again, just getting started at that point in his life. He's worked throughout his entire life. He finally sort of gets a little bit of space ahead of him for some comfort, so that he's taking care of his family. and then he passes away. So, even though Tom Thompson, died much younger, there's, there's something kind of similar, like a little echo 10 years later when, or I guess 15 years later, when MacDonald himself passes away at the relatively young age of 59 for an artist. Anyway, I think I should probably move on because I got to get this painting done so my wife can go to her dance class. Okay, so let's go right to our okay. So let's start now with our background layer. I'm just skipped right over the underpainting because usually I only do underpainting if there's faces and details that I need to preserve. I think we can just go right into this one. So it's a little bit wet here, but I think we can just start painting. So, wow, there are lots of comments in the chat there. Lolly and Kathy and Stacy blowing it up. I'll take a look a little bit later here. So, what do we want? What colors do we want to start here with? And can we tell how he painted this painting by looking at it closely? Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is he definitely did not paint a yellow underneath this. I bet you he painted this on a white canvas, which might make some of you very happy. Which is not too dissimilar to the way that the Impressionist painters that really influenced him as well worked. I think he's painted a cool blue with a little bit of white across that entire background. So let's do that. And let's... Okay. So let's take some of this cool blue. Let's take some white. Let's mix that together. Still needs a lot more white. And let's put these side by side, see how close we've got. I think we're going to take a bit of cool yellow, put that in there. We don't want to put too much in there, otherwise it's going to go bright green. Just want something just a little bit more, slightly more teal. And I'm going to put just a little bit of... Oh, okay. I didn't mean to put that much in there, but that's okay. We'll make it work. So I just put some matte medium in here. Matte medium is just transparent paint. It's paint that doesn't have any pigment in it. So I think that's pretty good. I actually really like that color. It's just it's like a baby blue that's just ever so slightly teal. And I think I'm just going to paint this over top of the whole sky. Now this might mean I'm going to lose some definition, or my pencil lines in the clouds. Not sure where all these little flakes of paint are coming from, but since these trees are a little bit transparent, I'm just... Okay. So this paint has already started to kind of cure a little bit, so it's getting a little bit stiffer. And so just kind of, that's, you can see why I mixed a bunch of it. And I painted it kind of quickly on there, because I don't want to take too long smearing all this on here. Again, you can see this is why I don't spend too much time trying to get all those lines exactly right, because sometimes just like this, we just paint over all of it, right? So I think that's good. What I'm going to do here is, this is, again, people always ask me, how do you get the paint to stay wet for so long? So in this case, let's say I might want to use this paint again. Oops. I'm just going to kind of build a little puddle of it here so it's not all spread out. Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's only just for touch-ups, really. Mostly... Okay. Good enough. M. Taylor says he illustrated several books with woodcut prints. Yes. Actually, I've got a bunch of his books down here. I was going to bring them all out and start flipping through them. Maybe if I end a little bit earlier, we'll look at them. But I'm under strict orders to wrap up as quickly as possible. So we'll see. Okay. So we'll just take a look. Now that looks really bright right now. I could have actually put a little bit of gray in there, to be honest. So... But we'll see when we start getting some clouds appearing on here how we feel about that. But I also don't mind. I really like color, so I don't mind that that use of color in this way. In fact, what I might do now is just blow dry this, and let's see if some of the pencil lines show back up here. People, Lolly and Kathy, talking about when the next feedback episode will be. I'm not. It'll be within the next week. I just don't know exactly when. Just schedules and stuff. I was planning on doing one this past weekend, but I wasn't feeling too well. I got the bug my daughter got, so. And I've also been taking care of our daughter while she's sick too, so there's been limited amount of time. So. but I know how it's definitely probably the most popular thing that we do on the channel, so I certainly haven't forgotten about it. Now let's put in some of these clouds. Now my pencil lines have disappeared entirely. That was one of the reasons I put that matte medium in there, was hoping that it would make this a bit more transparent. I didn't quite get my mixture exactly the way that I would have preferred, but you know, that's life, right? So can't always work the way we want it to. I'm going to put some matte medium down here. I'm not sure if I'll use all of that, so let's just take a bit out. I'm going to take some of my white again. Actually, let's take more of that matte medium. I think what I'm going to do here is paint a kind of slightly semi-transparent layer of white. You can see there's a little bit of blue on that brush. I don't care about that, because if anything, that's going to help my effort here. I was actually planning on just taking a little bit of the background color, but this is also, I want it to kind of blend in a little bit with what we're looking at. So now I don't have my pencil lines on here, so now I'm just going to sort of riff off what we see in the painting itself. And I've got my original outline. I just have this right up above here, so that also kind of helps, because I can just be kind of go like, okay, well, this shape, in fact, let's just do that right here, right? So this shape is going to be probably somewhere up here. Right there. So what I like about this, look how kind of nice and transparent that is. Otherwise, it would just be this intense white showing up there, which might be just way too much. So it's going to give me more of that wispy cloud quality. And one thing you can do is you can also take a brush. I like to use this sort of, especially an older brush that's sort of lost a little bit of its, you know, the bristles are a little bit kind of wild. You can see how quickly that dried. I'm actually surprised how quickly, a little bit alarmed actually how quickly that dried. And let's go down here. I'll just show you what we're up to here. Just kind of take a little bit of the sharpness of some of those clouds out. So you can even see like the first bit of paint that I mixed, because I used this brush to mix that color, is much thicker up here, versus as I started painting there was less and less paint on there. So I'm actually just going to paint a little bit beyond there. And let's go to a smaller brush as well. I want a bit of a few little Lots of tiny clouds. Floating around up here. Okay. So I think that's good for right now. Let's blow dry this, and then we're going to just use the exact same color over top of it to build up more solidity here. So I'm going to mute the microphone. So let's continue here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to still continue with the bigger brush for just a few minutes here. So this is the same color I was just painting with. I haven't added anything more to it. It's just a second layer. And so we can now make a few of these just a little bit more opaque. And I'm kind of staying away from the edges, just doing the interior of the clouds now. Okay, we're gonna need to do this again, or to blow dry that again. Okay. And you know, if you've got areas of your painting where it's, especially your background seems a little bit semi-transparent, then put a little bit, just put a little cloud there. I mean, I'm just sort of barely looking at the original. I know my clouds are sort of not exactly in the right place, so blow dry that again. So the reason why I'm blow drying it is because if I didn't, what's going to happen is the paint is going to be almost dry, but not quite dry. And then as I try to paint over top of it, I'm actually going to scrape away layers of paint. And that's super frustrating when that happens. That's usually the closest I come to using some filthy language. It's like, oh, because sometimes you're really happy with what's there, and then when you paint wet paint over paint that's not quite dry, it's like it just peels it right up. It's horrible. So that's just one of the things, little qualities with acrylic paint that we just have to be mindful of. Another thing too, like if we look at the way he's painted the clouds, so we want to have a few areas where the clouds, the more intense solidity of the white goes right to the edge of the sky, and other times where it's a little bit softer and kind of just blends out, right? Because they're all different. Every cloud's just a little bit different, so. And then, areas where there might be a little bit of a semi-transparent area in the middle of the cloud too. Okay. Well, actually, let me just see. Now, as I'm painting this, I notice he's got a little bit of yellow in there. A little bit of warm yellow. So I'm going to take a bit of that. Actually, let's blow dry this first. And then we'll add that yellow in. sky. Oh. Ah, was I on mute that whole time? Okay. Well, anyway, I was just saying that little bit of yellow helps give it the glow of the sun that was in behind these clouds, which are casting the shadows on the ground. So, but I am going to put a little bit more of that right in this area, but I want to blow dry it first. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit more of my matte medium. Because it's always easier to do this with a thin layer of paint than to do it too thick and then to be kind of stuck with it, right? So I have this kind of yellow. It's like there must be those chunks I think are coming. You know what I need to do is I need to clean my paint tubes, because it looks like what I'm getting is little dried pieces of paint showing up in the wet paint, and that drives me absolutely bonkers. Like that little chunk. Okay. Come on, there we go. Okay, I'm going to blow dry that, but then I'm going to add a little bit of blue back in there. Yeah, I'm not so happy with that now. It looks just very white up in the sky. Let's blow dry that, and then I'm going to put a little bit more blue back. Okay. Now, one thing, because of that, I need to go back and really bring out more white in these clouds. Let's take some more white. And we'll put some matte medium in here just to keep it a little bit transparent. Okay, so I think now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a black. So let's start with, where should we do this? I'm going to do it right here because we're not actually going to, well, I'm not going to use a black for a bit anyway. It's mostly going to be gray, so we don't need too much of it. We're just doing stuff in the sky. So I take my my cool blue and cool yellow and my warm red, and we'll put this in here. And so you can see it's still very green. We just need to add more red in there. Now we got a gray. That's pretty good. It's maybe still a little bit on the green side, so I went a little far with that red. That's better though. Okay. So let's take, we're just going to now kind of repeat a few of the steps we've done before, but this time with this gray. So we'll take some gray and put it in, or sorry, basically our black, and put it in here with some white and a little bit of matte medium. And now we can kind of just go into the interior of these clouds and just start kind of darkening. You know, when we're doing clouds, it's often takes some time to do it right anyway, to do it in a way that feels satisfying. So, you know, we could spend hours and hours. I'm sure MacDonald would have spent hours and hours working on this painting. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's hit it with the blow dryer again. Okay, so let's just take a little bit more of each. Our matte medium again. Oops. Just for the sake of speeding up, you know, we would probably do this with dozens of layers of very thin, transparent paint. I'm just going to kind of skip over a bunch of steps and just go to a little bit of a darker gray almost immediately here. Just, yeah, I mean, we would spend more time on this, but... You can see, like, my clouds are starting to kind of really transform into a different pattern than the original. And that's because, you know, I painted over, when I was starting this painting, I lost the pencil lines in here, but it's also just the natural organic way that when we paint, you know, you're going to start diverging from the original, even from nature itself, I would argue. And I think that's all a good thing, not something to beat yourself up about. Okay, let's blow dry that. I'm going to add a little bit of warm yellow into this mix. Ooh, that's a lot. Okay. Let's just make it darker. I wasn't expecting to put that much in there, but let's just go for it. Take a little brush, just soften it up. It needs to be a dry brush as well, right? And I just diluted it with a little bit more matte medium. It's not quite as dark over here. Okay. You know, I like that so much that I'm going to do a little bit more of it with a smaller brush. Let's use this. Okay. I think we need maybe one more layer here. Let's just get a little bit more of this gray. Oh. Okay. Bit more up here, and then I think so what I'm doing as I'm looking at my painting and I'm painting it, I'm squinting my eyes and then I'm looking at the original and just sort of comparing them back and forth. And what I'm looking at is the value contrast, the contrast between light and dark and how equal are they. Right, and so I see these areas up here, like this is being quite dark, these areas being quite dark, lighter, lighter. And I think I also am going to put a little bit of purple into a few things here, and then I think I'll be ready to move on. So let's just one last blow dry. So what I want to do is just want to add to this. Don't need much. I'm going to take a little bit of my cool red, a bit of my warm blue. Ooh, that's a lot. And mix this in here. That's great. This little bit of purple really conveys density. Really, it's like, whoa, that's a thick cloud right there. Because it's the opposite of the yellow of the sky, right? That purple is much darker. Okay, not bad. I'm still not the happiest possible with the sky in the background. I kind of goofed on that a little bit, but, you know, I think it's time to move on. So we'll clean up these brushes. Oh, Paula says, I just returned from the doctor today, returned alive. Dentist extracted one of my teeth. It got infected. The pain was so strong, I almost had a heart attack. Oh my goodness. Paula, I'm so glad you made it through. That's just so horrible. Dental, anything dental. Oof. The pain in the mouth. Ooh. Very unpleasant. Okay. It's time for tea. So... now it's time to paint the foreground, to work on the grass and start putting these trees in there. And even though technically this would be maybe even background or middle ground, the area of these trees that are right on the edge of the horizon where the sky meets the ground. So in fact, that's probably where I'll start. I'll get a little bit of that in place because that's the furthest thing in the picture. So... in fact, let's just take a quick look, see how this one, what we got down there. Well, we've actually got a bit of a little bit of a purple, cool purple on the horizon back there. And then we're building to some really cool greens. And only just a little bit of warm green in the foreground. Oh, I didn't even notice those little... oh, sorry. Not even on camera. So we have this little bit of kind of a cooler purple in this little slice back there, or that far hill. So we'll get that in first. So... it's not too dissimilar from the color we mixed earlier. But let's start with our cool blue and cool red. I want this to be primarily blue. I mean, one thing just what's worth noting is, look how when we mixed the cool blue and the cool red, we got a color not too far off from our warm red, right? It's definitely not the same color. But those two colors exist like on the color wheel, little just this like right here, and it's basically like a warm blue that's been pulled towards the neutral core. So let's take that. We need a substantial amount of white in there. And I'm even just going to take a little bit of this matte medium with my gray in there. Just to, again, the more white and gray that we put into a color, the further away it looks. So you can't really go wrong with adding a little bit of extra in there. Oops, let's go. Okay. See, even that's still a little bit too bold, so I'm putting more white in there. And even then, that's still a little bit too white, isn't it? Or too colorful. We need to mute it even more. There we go. So even though we can't really see it back here, I'm still going to paint it there. So if I do want to leave a little sliver of that hillside back there. Okay. Now, let's do another look. The next thing we want to do is start putting in these cool lime emerald greens that are just popping. And then, of course, we'll do these bushes that are in front of it, but we're not quite there yet. Let's clean that brush. So let's take our cool yellow, a little bit of cool blue. Oops, sorry. So mostly cool yellow, just a little bit of cool blue. And some white. Now that looks to me just way too, like I put too much white in there, but I think when we get this down, well, maybe let's put a bit more cool yellow back in here. I might have gone a bit too far. Let's take a bit of the gray even. I'm just going to mute it a little bit. Like right now on the palette, it's like, well, the color's kind of blah. But when it's right next to the purple, you know, like something, a color that is nearly opposite to it on the color wheel, I think it's going to be more than fine. think I need a bit more white just to make it a bit more opaque. So let's go back here. Okay, and you know what? It's actually, I think it's at this moment, it's worth me spending a second with a. I just like to put a bit of tape here, and let's get this straight. My horizon line. So. So this is just to help me kind of see how straight that line is. Because we are definitely getting crooked. Ooh, yeah. Okay. You can see we're about an eighth of an inch out. Okay. Okay, there we go. Better. I'll keep that to the side. Now, it's definitely not as intense of a green as he painted. I'm going to take this same color, though. Okay. Let's let that dry, and I'm actually gonna blow. And I'm going to mix that color again with less white. So I'm going to take my cool yellow, a little bit of cool blue. Needs even more cool yellow. Wow, as I paint that, I'm like, man, it seems to need more and more yellow. Okay, I think I'm just gonna leave that there. Let's, what should we do next? So I think I'm gonna paint the foreground trees here, which are, we got warm greens and grays. Maybe I'll just blow dry that real quick. So actually, what's he doing here? You know what? It looks like he painted a cool purple. Ah, okay, so what he's done, he's painted this cool turquoise color, teal, with purple to ground those things a little bit further backwards in space. So let's do that. Let's take our... It's kind of like this, but maybe just a little bit less white. I wonder if I can get away with that. Let's take our cool blue and cool yellow. Mix this in here. So we're going to use that color. We're also going to mix, where should we do this? Cool yellow, or a little bit of cool yellow, cool blue, mostly like that, with a little bit of white. So he's going to use these two combinations of colors for those areas in the medium horizon area. Let's get a smallish brush. I'm going to start with this again, I just want to take a look at my spacing. Oops, where did... Okay, so we're basically okay. And you know, I think I need to zoom back out just so I can see them side by side. So this is my kind of teal color that I just mixed. I'm basically going to paint right across this painting. In fact, one of the things, probably a smart idea, would be just to draw a little line here. And again, I can use this to kind of help me refer to, it looks like I've got a tree here. Oh, see, there's that, I don't know if you can see it, left a little spot there for me to see that. Okay, so let's zoom back in. Oops. Just gonna. So now I'm just gonna go into these purples that I mixed here, or this purple. Oops. Oh, you know what? Maybe while I'm here too. Now I'm going to paint over these lines with a warmer color soon here. I think what he's doing with these cool warm colors is that he's deliberately putting some of these cool colors underneath to give that little bit of a colder area in the shadows. Okay. Okay. So let's, I think what I'll do now is I'm going to paint a warm green in down under here. So let's take our warm yellow and warm blue. We don't need a lot of blue. So that is kind of like a mustardy color that I've just put in there. And the reason I'm putting a deliberately a very warm colors there is he ends up using a bunch of cooler colors in this area. And I want to make sure that there's warm colors underneath to keep those cool colors from going too far back into space. So actually, what I could do here is take some more warm yellow and warm blue, mix that together, and we're going to make a bit of a brown, kind of a brownish green. And even because this is a little bit further back, let's take just also a little bit of white and put that in there. There we go. Oops. need more white in here. And I'm also going to put a little bit of matte medium. Oh, okay, too much. Too much paint on my brush there. So my brush is kind of almost dry while I'm doing this, just sort of blotting paint around there. Now there is another set of trees further back here. I'm just going to skip that for now. Okay. I mean, now you can start seeing how that color brings out some of the yellow in the clouds. Let's also take, I'm going to take the same color, actually just more yellow here, and I'm going to just put that so that's going to help give just a little bit of yellow in where I'm about to paint next. So the next thing I want to do is I want to get back to my cool green. let's take this cool yellow, cool blue. Let's mix that up. How intense of a color are we looking at here? There might be places where we use this color. That is so intense, though. It makes me a little anxious to use a lot of that. So I'm going to take just a little bit of my black. Is there any left here? Just a little bit, just to get a little bit of that intensity of that color to go away. Have to make a bit more of this. I'm just painting over. One thing like oil painters often do a lot of is applying paint and wiping paint off. It's very hard to do that with acrylic paint because it just dries so quickly. But it is a really effective strategy to just that way you can kind of modulate your the application of the paint and get some areas that are just a little bit thinner. And you know, when it comes to nature, we just want as much variety as possible. We want to make that scene as dynamic as possible. Okay. That's looking pretty good. So I'm just wondering, do I want to do more stuff in the sky, or can I just leave it? Let's look at them side by side. If I'm going to do something with that sky, I want to do it right now. Yeah, let's do a little bit there. I think I'm just going to glaze a little bit in the sky. Okay, so now I've got the whole painting is now covered with paint. Roughly the right colors are in the right place. I want to go back to the background and just tinker with the sky a little bit. I feel it's a little bit just white, and I want a bit more color back in there. So what I'm going to do is just glaze a little bit, or you can use matte medium to just add a bit more color back here. So I'll just show you the original. Well, let's do compare them side by side here. Yeah, you could see how it's almost like a golden color over everything. So literally what we can do is we can take this warm yellow from our Imprimatura, and this time I'm just going to take, should I do glazing fluid? Let's do a bit of glazing. Let's do this with glazing fluid. So I'm going to put that there. Let's just get a bit of yellow. Ooh, this might be a little bit too yellow. Not bad. do this over here, though. So I want to just be kind of subtle with this. I don't want this to get too wild, or else I'm going to regret it. That's still pretty thick. I should maybe have blow dried this. I'm just thinking I might smear a little bit of paint all over if there's any wet paint in those trees. There, that gets us closer, doesn't it? Especially up in here. It has taken a little bit of the oomph out of those clouds. So let's see if there's any way I can just bring a bit more of that purple back in here a bit. So that's nice. Now I do get more of a sense of a glow with just that little bit of warm yellow now permeating the sky. It really does feel like it's glowing, which is what we want. Paula says, how's your graphic book, Michael? Your graphic novel? I would like to order it. Oh, well, you and my publisher, I'm sure, would love to see it. It's still in progress. Still working on it, getting there slowly. Okay. You know, at this stage 2, I want to make a decision. Do I want to make this even colder, that grass? I mean, that is an intense emerald green. I think I'm okay with that. I think it's going to be fine, but I could do a little bit more using some cool yellow and white. Do I want to do that? Do I want to do it? No, you know what? I'm going to move forward because I'm just starting to run out of time. So let's go do... I'm just going to move on from background. Okay, so now I feel like the sky is done. Let's move on from the sky. Let's now finish the bottom third of the painting where we're calling our foreground is. So what do we... Well, I guess the first thing I'm going to do next is I'm going to paint some a warm brown over top of these trees where it's required. And then we're going to put some warm green over top of these trees. So previously we had sort of a warm brown, a muted warm brown that I put over here. That's how we get this sort of nice kind of fall colors. Now we're going to paint some more thick warm brown, probably with a little bit more blue in there too. So let's mix that color up. It's kind of like the color we had here. So take our, let's take a bit more warm red, a lot of warm yellow, and some warm blue. The more blue we put in this, the darker that brown is going to get, right? There we go. That's a nice dark brown. Okay. And as always, you could see that I mixed a few different browns there, so I have options to kind of bounce back and forth to add a little bit of nuance if needed. So I'm not covering up all of the blue. I want a little bit of that to come through. I don't want to hide it all. So I'm also just sort of painting with like a fairly dry brush and not holding the brush that tight either. It's just sort of like very loose in my hand because I don't want to create really dark, solid brush strokes. So one of the final things I would do is to kind of go over some of these again, just these few trees right here with a little bit of black to really make a distinction between them and the trees that are, you know, a little bit further away in the background there. Okay. Looking good. Okay. I want to blow dry that. Now, just looking at his painting, I do see a little bit of kind of cool blue in there. Actually, that color there is kind of what I want. I want this, but I'm going to add some matte medium to it just to thin it out. So this color here was my cool blue, cool yellow, and I added a little bit of black into it. And now I'm just putting a bit of matte medium to thin it out a little bit. Oops. Now, I'm not sure what the, I haven't really thought about why he would have done this. I think it's, again, to give it more nuance in the leaves and I mean, these are the kinds of things that, his teacher, Arthur Hemming or William Cruikshank, might have passed along to him, right? Little tips about, you got to put a little bit of cool blue in the interior of a tree. That's what makes it work. Okay, boss. So, now let's take some warm yellow and warm blue. And I'm just going to I think there could have been a little bit more, some gray in here. This is a pretty intense color, but we'll just go with it. Okay. Now, we're just going to finish the horizon here. Not the horizon, the grass in the foreground. Just going to use more of this warm green. Actually, let's bring that back out. So now we want to use some purples and greens down here. And where's my smallest brush? Here. Okay, so let's mix basically the same purple again. Let's take our cool red and warm blue. Mix this together. A little bit more on the blue side of things. And we'll put some white in there. Now, that's pretty dark even with the white, so I'm going to put a few of these darker pieces down. Remember, this is the color when I put some white into it. And it still seems a little bit too dark. I don't want to put any of that color further back, otherwise it's just going to pull that background closer towards the foreground. Okay. Let's take more white. So now we're kind of painting with a little bit of an impressionist kind of approach, little dabs of paint here. Just put a bit of this purple with a little bit of white back there. Okay. Just taking a bit more of the magenta and mixing that into here just to get a little bit more of a pinkish quality. I need a bit more. White as well. And you could decide to add a lot more magenta and make these a little bit more pink. I'll put a little bit of that in here, but you know, we could have some blue flowers. In fact, I might put a few little kind of blue flowers in there, might be nice. Let's take a bit more blue, warm blue, mix that in there. Okay, now let's take some of this. I could need some more warm. Actually, let's take some of this warm yellow right there. This will make a brown. Actually, you know what? Maybe we can use this brown up here. sure my wife is starting to sweat that I'm taking so long. I'm going to cut it close. Might have been a bit too much with that orange. That's okay. Now mostly warm yellow and blue. Okay, and then I want to take my cool yellow and cool green, get the super saturated green. So, we talk about trying to keep your cool colors in the background, warm colors in the foreground, and here we are using a cool color right in the foreground. Now, the reason why this isn't going to be a total disaster is because we've got the whole background here is got warm greens and warm yellows, warm purples, warm oranges. So all of those things are going to keep pulling the foreground forward. Okay. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to blow dry that. And since I'm running out of time, I'm going to glaze with this. Let's see. Who knows how this is going to turn out. So let's take some glazing fluid and mix it in with our green here, with our cool green. And let's just see. Ah. Definitely gets me closer. Okay. Let's mix a black real quick, and we're almost done. So let's take our cool blue, cool yellow, warm red. Okay. So we're just going to do a couple little finishing touches in the trees, and then I think we're all done here. So let's bring that. In fact, let's. So now I'm using my black. I'm going to put this on these trees, and just immediately, look how suddenly that tree already feels like it's closer to us. So I think I'll just leave those like that. Okay. And then one last blow dry here. So let's take a little bit more glazing fluid here. And let's get a smaller brush here. So just darkening those areas. And maybe even let's see if we take this. This allows us to really kind of quickly darken some of this area here. Oops, maybe that doesn't need to be quite so dark down there. Let's wipe that away. Okay. We can even take that, just this little bit of black. And just got a little bit too much paint on my brush. And let's just soften that up. be done in 2 minutes here. So, I think... Okay. Not bad. Not bad. But I have to stop there. So... We're at that time of the painting where we're going to compare them side by side, see how things turned out. If you found today's episode to be informative, interesting, entertaining, laughable, hilariously bad, either way, consider leaving a, well, you can leave a comment in the video. That's always super helpful. I forget to ask for that. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, let your friends know, take a photograph of this artwork. Upload it to our Facebook group. We would love to see your artwork on the Facebook group, and this week we'll do a feedback episode so that we can celebrate your achievement. Feel free to leave a donation as well. There's the PayPal. I saw Stacy gave a couple bucks there. Really is just a couple little dollars. If everyone gave a couple dollars, wow, this is all I would have to do to make a living. That would be great. So thank you so much to all of your support throughout the years we've been doing this. It's fantastic that I can continue to do this. Let's take a look at the paintings side by side. Okay. I think I'm like 90% there. I think if I had a little more time, I'd probably work a little bit more in the sky. But I think overall, I got a pretty good handle on this painting. So let's just zoom in. Maybe let's start up in the sky here. We didn't really look at the clouds that closely at any point. So now, of course, as I've said a few times, I allowed the sky to kind of go in a slightly different direction. So it's not quite as, it's going to look a little bit different here, right? You know, as I see it, I can really see he actually spent time here painting with the brush, individual little colors. Like, look at that. That's interesting what he did there. You can see I was running late for time, so I just kind of quickly did a version of it. But he's certainly spent a lot of time in the clouds. I think he's certainly spent more time on the clouds than anywhere else in this painting. Let's go down here like that. How far can we go down? Basically at the bottom there. So, oh, I didn't even notice his signature down there. You could do that too if you like. I think I got pretty close. That particular kind of emerald green is very tricky to pull off. Oh, I forgot there was a couple people there. Look at all these little white dots we could put there if we wanted to. Let's just leave it there for a second. Got kind of close. I'm happy with the way that the grass in the foreground turned out, especially considering how quickly I was trying to get that accomplished. You know, it's not exactly there, but we are definitely in the ballpark for sure. Right? And it's just like maybe even another glaze with a little bit more yellow a cool yellow would have helped that. But you know, all in all, I think we did a pretty good job. Let's just zoom back out. And there we are. Another painting in the books. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining me, for painting along, and I can't wait to see the artwork that you guys create. Remember to join the Facebook group if you haven't already. There's like a dozen people every day. So it's growing and growing and growing, which is very awesome. Again, remember not to share any personal information on there. So you never know who's on Facebook just joined. Anyway, well, thank you so much, everybody. We will see you guys sometime this week for our feedback episode. I'll try to give as much notice as possible. We'll see you then. Enjoy the rest of your evening or morning, wherever you are on our beautiful planet. Good night, everybody.